Hi, I'm Dr. David Dobson. Welcome to Conversations. Today, my guest is Dr. Giovanna Rodriguez-Garcia. Is a research fellow at the Autonomous University of Bucaramanga in Colombia. Today, we will discuss her research project, which looks into gender and corruption. Giovanna, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, David. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation and for the opportunity to talk a little more about my research.
Giovanna, you are currently leading a research project on gender and corruption at the Autonomous University of Bucaramanga. Could you give us a brief overview of that project and what sparked your interest in the interaction of gender and corruption?
Yes, of course. Well, this project I am leading is funded by the Colombian Institute of Credit and Studies Abroad. Um, this gender had to understand how gender shapes how people perceive corruption and respond to it here in Colombia. This is interesting because usually public debates often assume that women are less corrupt
Mm,
and women are less in public life. So
mm,
the evidence is mixed here.
mm,
So I am trying to understand what is the relationship between
mm,
women and corruption, and that
mm,
is the reason why I decided to run these controlling experiments.
mm,
But the funny thing here is why I became interested in this, and it was in 2023 because I was attending an international conference in Europe, and I saw an experiment with the students in Germany and the US. And then I thought, well, maybe we need to run these experiments also in Colombia and to test with people in Colombia, with the students in Colombia, to see if gender norms and corruption dynamics are similar, are different, or what is the different, or what could be different and what can be equal.
wonderful. So, Joanna, as you said, the common narrative is that women are less corrupt. Your research suggests that this is a simplification.
Mhm.
Why is it misleading to treat this as a universal claim rather than looking at specific conditions?
Well, well, actually, the evidence is very mixed.
Mm,
when we when we are looking for for data in different environments, for example, even though in observation with observational data we can find different results if we focus in countries that have systemic corruption and countries that doesn't have systemic corruption. So but when you we are looking also at the experiments, we also find different results. When we conduct the experiments in countries with systemic corruption, we find another kind of results. So I found this. Okay, this is our simplification. Our
mm,
simplification. We need to understand more the contents of that. That was one of the reasons I said, well, why not to run these experiments here in Colombia when we had like systemic corruption
mm,
and see if we can find similar results or not.
mm,
So I am I think that is very convincing that the context is important. And I think that we cannot assume that women are automatically cleaner.
mm,
There is a risk when we design anti-corruption policies and we think that women are automatically cleaner. We
mm,
need to understand better this link to design better anti-corruption policies.
mm, Very interesting. So, how do Latin American political party structures create a different corruption landscape for women compared to the Western democracies often studied in this field?
Well, here in Colombia, party politics runs through gatekeepers
Mm,
and informal networks and
mm,
very high campaign costs.
mm,
I mean, I assume that is similar
mhm,
to other contexts, but here we had this part related with systemic corruption. So corruption is like in everyday life
mm,
is the way that the people something relate with the public administration. So this relationship shapes how gets access to resources and protection, and it also shapes who gets exposed to corrupt exchange. So at the same time, gender socialization often pushes women into different roles in politics and public administration. So women must face a stronger expectation to behave clean,
mm,
but they also may have fewer connections to the networks where key decisions are made. So this corruption landscape is different to other landscapes that other experiments have been conducted. So this is not about personal honesty. This is about access, opportunity structures, and risks and penalties for women that women face when they enter in spaces that are still very male dominated.
Hmm. Yeah, interesting. Your research suggests that pro-sociality, that is being helpful or community-mindedness, can actually facilitate corruption. This sounds counterintuitive, as you can see. How can the same traits that make someone a good citizen also make them a more effective participant in an illicit network?
Well, right here there is a really important double-edged
Mm,
point,
mm,
and yeah, this is super interesting.
mm,
Behavioral economics, for
mm,
example,
mm,
suggests that being more like community-minded,
mm, mm,
loyal, and trusting is
mm,
great for cooperation. But at the same time, these traits can also make illicit networks work
mm,
better because there are like trust. People had more trust in others. People had more trust, maybe also in the government. So when you are there are also evidence that when you are in an interchange of corruption, when you are paying a bribe, sometimes you need to trust the other people in some way. So
mm,
that is the reason why we had here this double-edged point. But prosociality isn't automatically anti-corruption. So
mm,
in these close communities, it can actually prosociality can actually facilitate corruption because it strengthens and this reciprocity within the network. So for me, the key is to connect prosocial values with meritocracy. That is for me what is most important. This is
yeah.
about caring for others, but also building solidarity
Mm,
by thinking about fair rules on an equal access and not to personal favors or special treatments to other people in the same community.
mm. Excellent. Uh, Giovanna, your current ISTEX project, Gender and Corruption Laboratory Experiments in Columbian University, uh, you use behavioral laboratory experiments to study these issues. Could you walk us through a corruption scenario you set up for students in the lab? And how do you measure something as hidden as a bribe in a controlled environment?
Yeah, this is very interesting. At the beginning, we with all the team we were thinking
Mm,
it may
mm,
only one experiment,
mm,
but at the end we conducted one lab experiment and
yeah.
another three vignettes experiments.
Mm,
So the vignette experiments are easier in the implementation because in the vignette experiments we are like looking more for perception of corruption, or we are looking more for opinions.
mm,
But in the sorry, my cat is here. But in the lab experiment, we are looking for more for how you say this is more difficult because it's in the lab. So we are
mm,
looking for more like behavioral
mm,
conduits, right?
mm,
So uh, in this experiment, we weren't asking for bribes. We were
mm,
asked for investment. So we
mm,
masked this concept in all the experimental designs. So participants were put in a situation where they control a pot of money and decide how much pass or how
mm,
much donate for a public purpose. It
mm,
makes because it makes that people feel in a real situation
mm,
that could allocate what they have, and this was how I measure on the misuse of the funds.
Very interesting. So, in your experiments, you keep the scenario identical, but you change the gender of the officials. Do people inherently expect women to be more honest? And if so, that does lead to a purity tax where women are punished more severely than men for the exact same wrongdoing?
That is very interesting. That this we did this with the vignette experiments. Sorry, we
Mm,
did this with the vignette experiments. And actually, of course, we were expecting in our hypothesis
mm,
that that women were we treated like moronics. And we had here three experiments. In
mm,
the first experiment was most about perception of corruption. Is
mm,
a situation with different genders, and we asked the people, where do you perceive more corruption? When we're a man or when we're a woman? And when we're a man, was perceiving more
mm,
corruption than we
mm,
women. That's true.
mm,
But the most interesting was the
mm,
experiment with an electoral campaign,
mm,
because in that because in that experiment we had like an electoral campaign for a man and for a woman, and we had exactly the same characteristics. We And at the end we say that both, well, one and one, they were found in a corrupt event, but they
mm.
weren't found guilty. So,
Okay.
but they were in this scandal.
Mm,
And then we think, okay, maybe women will be punished harder than men,
mm,
but not.
mm,
We found the opposite. We found that
mm,
people won't penalize a female politician more for a corrupt behavior.
mm,
So it means, or our interpretation for this is that the honesty stereotypes sometimes
mm,
work like a benefit of the doubt. So
mm,
people might think, even if she did something questionable, she is still probably more honest than the typical politician. And this doesn't mean that the purity task doesn't
mm,
exist. It
mm,
might show up in other contexts, so in different types of allegations.
mm,
So for me here, the key point is that we still don't know
mm,
when it gets in our big our big what is the burden, what is the
mm,
burden of this purity task. So that
mm,
is exactly why these experiments matter, and the results of this experiment was super important. I still need to conduct some interviews with the students
yeah.
who participate in these experiments
Mm,
to be more clear about these mechanisms,
mm,
but
mm,
I I am completely sure that this mechanism of benefit of doubt
mm,
works, and
mm,
this is super important. That is
mm,
different
mm.
to other literature have found.
Yeah, very interesting, Joanna. Exploring the practical implication of your research for governance anti-corruption strategy, some argue that women appear less corrupt simply because they have historically been excluded from the old boys club,
Mhm.
where big deals happen. Based on your research into political party structures, what happens to corruption level when women gain equal access to those same illicit power networks?
Well, that is a
Mm,
fascinating question
mm,
because so far,
mm,
eh, I think that women still don't have equal access
mm,
to where real power
mm,
is, and sometimes corrupt deals are.
mm,
So, so far, and the last reports of the United Nations say that we still are very far away of having like this equal access. And yeah, even though the most equal country in the world, they are not exactly the same. So
mm,
I know that quota laws bring more women into politics.
mm,
Um, Also brought more equality in influence for resources,
mm,
but still networks there are a lot of different. So
mm,
we are often observing women in a system where access is unequal, which means we don't fully know what would happen under truly equal conditions. We still don't know what is gonna work or not. Um, my personal view or my expectation is that it could be as simple as women become the same as men. I don't think it's gonna be that one,
mm,
because some evidence also suggests that women might prioritize different issues,
mm,
especially policies linked to care and social spending. So
mm,
that could be like shift the agendas.
mm,
I now remembering another research that say that women also push more for the anti-corruption agenda
mm,
in policies. So But incentives to the corrupt networks can be stay corrupt.
Mm,
So, but we still don't know. So
mm.
we still need the changing on the rules.
Okay, okay, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. Giovanna, your research looks at how risk and punishment influence real decisions. In environments where personal cost or corruption is low, what role does gender actually play in whether someone chooses to cross that ethical line?
Wow. I will connect this question with my previous point.
Okay.
If stereotypes
Mm,
sometimes give women a benefit of the doubt,
mm,
that could translate into a lower perception in punishment in some settings. Um, in places with high impunity, maybe the decisions to cross an ethical line are usually driven more by incentives that by gender itself.
mm,
So people think about things like, will I get caught? How strong is the assumption? And do I have a network that protects me? So gender can still matter, but mainly through expectations about monitoring and punishment. I cannot claim this work the same way in other environments like in course because it would require different kind of data. But at least in what people expect or perception of people, this is what I'm thinking. So but yeah, this is possible.
yeah, good to know. Giovanna, if you were advising a government in the region on anti-corruption training, how should they change their approach based on your finding? Is adding more women enough, or do the institutions themselves need to be redesigned?
Yeah, well, this is interesting because
Yeah.
I am now
Mm,
like I
mm,
am now writing a co-edited book
okay.
on gender and corruption, on gender and
Mm,
anti-corruption policies.
mm,
So is there are very few evidence of anti-corruption policies with gender lenses.
mm,
So that is the idea why we are co-editing this book on this topic.
mm,
So based on the findings from this research,
mm,
specifically for this research, my advice to our government would be don't build anti-corruption training around these stereotypes that
mm.
women are naturally more honest.
Yeah.
That
Mm,
is not gonna work
mm,
because that is not completely true.
mm, mm,
It's true that women and men, because of the stereotypes, are rising with different values. That's
mm,
completely true. But it
mm,
doesn't mean that when we are facing the same kind of network, we are not behaving the same.
mm,
So, of course, training should be gender sensitive, but in a very practical way or a very concrete way.
mm,
I would think like we can focus on the real risk points. For example, places with discretion and weak oversight create opportunities for corruption,
mm,
and maybe teach tools to people that can use the to clear procedures, documentations, conflict of interest rules.
mm, mm,
We can also address on how the stereotypes shape
mm,
accountability, that they create like blind spots.
mm,
Sorry.
mm,
Either purity tax or benefits
mm,
of the doubt, for
mm,
example, that we were
mm,
talking before.
mm,
But also, I think that is possible, like include like more like realistic scenarios that
mm,
reflect gender rates in workplaces, for example, like
mm,
harassment,
mm,
coercion, or retaliation for reporting.
mm,
So for me, the goal is integrity for everyone, plus protection that
mm,
recognize an equal risk for women and men, because it's true
mm,
that we had also facing different risks. So
mm,
integrity for everyone, but with protections for this unequal risk that we are facing.
mm. I know this is not part of research, but have you wondered about the corruption association with the type of democracy countries have, their economy. Because if you look at Transparency International report, normally they saw high corruption in those countries which has a very high uh, like poverty, and unemployment is very high, and the governments are not necessarily democratic, things like that.
Yeah. There is well, this is another important point because we have like most of the research that I am telling you is like in more democratic context because
Mm,
access to data is easier,
mm,
right?
mm,
But in not democratic countries, access to data is more complicated, so we
mm,
know a little less.
mm,
There is some kind of research that say
mm,
that okay, there is a point like
mm,
I don't
mm,
remember if it's a U-shaped or inverted U-shaped
mhm,
relationship. I don't
mm,
remember
mm,
now,
mm,
but yes, there is this kind of non-linear relationship between economics and corruption when
mm.
we are talking about no democratic countries. So
Yeah,
that's completely true, but the relationship is
yeah,
different, which
yeah.
it makes again it,
Mm,
it leads me to my first question. The
mm,
context is very important, so
mm,
having very general results and
mm,
arguing that women are more
mm,
honest than men, no, that's
mm.
not completely true.
Yeah.
We need to understand what are the mechanisms and what are the correct links to
Mm,
create better politics,
yeah.
anti-corruption policies, sorry,
Yeah, yeah.
policies.
Thank you, Joanna. Joanna, your research aimed to move from broad claim to evidence about specific mechanism. What is the one specific mechanism or result you have discovered that surprised you the most?
Well, honestly, for me was this experiment with the electoral punishment
Okay.
because we were expecting, I was expecting
Mm,
a purity task, as you
mm,
mentioned before.
mm,
But we found the opposite.
mm,
Female politician was punished less. So it
mm.
led me to think why? Why was the reason?
Yeah,
Is this the benefits of the doubt mechanisms?
yeah.
As I said, I still need to conduct some reviews because another professor recommended to me like one, like 2, 3 weeks ago about like conducting these interviews with the students to think more about these benefits of the doubt mechanism. And for me, this is surprising because this is like still like women are purity. Women
Mm,
are like higher values, right?
mm,
So we believe more in there, but we also uh, believe more to her. So that this is super interesting, and I need to explore more this mechanism.
mm.
But it seems some people hold on to the stereotype that women are more honest.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
even with evidence of
yeah,
wrongdoing, they
yeah,
might intersect it has less severe or less
yeah,
typical with compared to
yeah,
men. So
yeah,
yeah, the
yeah,
results shine how I think
yeah,
about the stereotypes.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I
yeah.
like this
Yeah,
mechanism, this
great.
result.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you.
Okay.
Joanna, as you look ahead, what is the big question you are most excited to answer next? And and
Well,
and and how do you hope it changed the way you think about integrity in Latin America?
yeah. This is a lot. This is a lot that I have been thinking of it because when I found the results here and when I was conducting the results on these experiments on gender, I had this question about that. What is gonna work then to change the
Mm,
behavior, not just the attitudes? What can I do for change the behavior? So can can I design ethical trainings maybe using realistic scenarios and behavioral tools maybe to reduce like how people justify their wrongdoings and corruption? So That's my bigger question, and that is the direction I wanna take. I am currently looking for funding because this kind of work
Mm.
requires like more intense in experimental
Yeah,
designs. This is
yeah,
more policy evidence designs, and I
yeah.
want to see to try to see if these ethical trainings still
Mm,
I cannot define very well this the word is ethical trainings or
mm,
what other kind of trainings. If I can train in a some way na people to add in a right in a right yeah in a right thinking or in a right way.
mm.
So these experiments also will involve like facilitators. Yeah, so I am looking for finding for
Yeah,
funding for
yeah,
that. So let's
uh,
see if I can find the funding for the
yeah,
research. Yeah, that's let's see. But
yeah,
this is a very interesting question, and
yeah.
I am really excited about it.
Yeah. Yeah, and absolutely. I mean, these are important questions to be answered, and I really hope that you find appropriate funding to continue this interesting and important research. Giovanna, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your important research. We wish you every success with your project at UNAB and your continued work in this field.
No, David, thank you so much for the invitation and for the chance to share this word. I really appreciate that you contacted me. Yeah, we can talk about this. Thank you very much.
Thank you.